Hey everybody, this is Sarah Spencer with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and this is Know Your Yellow Jackets. I'm joined by our Georgia Tech beat writer, Ken Segura. Ken, Georgia Tech is 2-0 under interim head coach Brent Key. Is this what you were expecting?
It is not. I mean, certainly, if I'd looked at these two games, I would have thought they got a good chance with Duke, or actually maybe not in a good chance. Duke's a pretty good team, and certainly Pitt, you thought going on the road, top 25 team, that's probably not a good matchup for them. So no, this is. I mean, I would have thought if they're 1-1, that'd be a win. So for them to be 2-0 and to look good in both games it's not what I thought would happen at all.
We actually just spoke to Brent Key, and one thing that he said that really stood out to me, it was actually a question about recruiting. And it's a bye week, so we have time to ask him about different things. And he mentioned getting that respect back a little bit is something that they're focusing on. Can you see it trending that direction? I know it's a small sample size, but even just that we're talking about that, it's just such different energy than it was even just 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, you start with the players, and they don't want to be 1-3, and everyone's making fun of them, and social media is all on their backs now, and so I think you can see just the players' excitement about winning and being at home here. The game against Duke was such a great environment. I can definitely see that there's energy, a different kind of energy, and what he was talking about was going on the road recruiting. And
there's a flyover right now. Don't mind that. We scheduled it right now.
And the coaches were going out there and have their Georgia Tech gear on, and maybe they're looked at a little differently than they would have been a few weeks ago. And so it's obviously, as you said, it's two games, a lot of things can still happen, but I think certainly everyone's looking at them differently than they did just a few weeks ago.
How crazy is it to think about Georgia Tech's 3-3? You got 6 games left. I mean, you're playing Virginia Tech, who struggled a good bit this year. You got to play Virginia. I mean, it's possible. Bowl eligibility is there.
Right.
It's not there yet, but it's on the horizon.
Yeah.
It's not unrealistic, which I think has just, for people watching, I think that's just got to be so encouraging, because that just did not feel like that's where it was going to start the season.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. The last, maybe Tech fans don't find this funny, but the last few years, they always had those, bowl projection lists, and I have not bothered to look at those because I knew Georgia Tech's not going to be on them. And so now I'm thinking, let's see if people are already thinking about Georgia Tech as a viable bowl team. And you look at the schedules you said, Virginia Tech certainly are 2 games that you would think are pretty winnable. And that leaves you 4 games to pick off one
Florida
more.
State, they play Georgia.
Right, North Carolina and Georgia.
Right.
And so you got, 4 games to pick off one, and that all seems pretty reasonable. It's not, I'm sure Virginia Tech are thinking, we can beat Georgia Tech, so it's not a done deal, but certainly the path is there, and maybe, certainly more so than you would have felt in probably a long while.
Nothing's a done deal for sure. I mean, you still got to win 3 more games to get there, but I just think it's crazy that we're having this conversation and that this is how Brent Key has started. I mean, you saw the reaction from the student section last game was just so wild, and I think it's cool to see people getting excited. But no game this week. It's a bye week for the Jackets. What can they kind of do this week I almost thought on paper, I was like, is this an ill-timed bye week? Because you've got all this momentum, sort of. I mean, that's not the most quantifiable thing, but sometimes you want to kind of keep going when you're having that good hitting streak, so to speak. What do you think about the time of this bye week, and then how they can spend it to kind of keep things going the right direction?
Well, from a health perspective, they had a few guys beat up against Duke, and so this, from that perspective, it's probably good for them to have some rest time. One thing that he had mentioned, Brent Key, was that he wanted this to be a recovery and improvement, week, and so certainly
a little bit of a mental recharge.
Right, exactly. Yeah, he's just thinking about he told them I guess today or tomorrow he didn't want them at all in the building, and I think that was well received by those guys.
Players were like, "We get to sleep in? Are you kidding me?"
So I think you do that, and one thing that he mentioned at the end was that they got to work on their punt protection. Obviously,
I wanted to ask you about that. That was something that was such a big problem, and they are addressing it and tweaking some things.
Yeah. So what they did right after the coaching change was that they appointed Jason Seymour as the special teams coordinator, and he put in a fairly simple punt protection scheme. And the goal was, let's not get a punt blocked and make sure that the kids can execute it properly, which they did. And so it's successful to the extent that they were able to not have any punts blocked, but obviously Duke ran a punt back 81 yards, and they ran another one back, 30 or 40 yards. And so now the next thing is, okay, now the teams know that we can only run this one scheme. We've got to kind of mix things up. Yeah, so
add an adjustment is
I'm
what he
sure by the
mentioned.
time the Virginia game rolls around next Thursday, we'll see something different in what they do.
What's the biggest thing that has made, or I guess what has made the biggest difference for this Georgia Tech team that you've seen these 2 games? There's probably quite a few things because it's such a different look than how they started the season.
Defensively, I think it's a lack of fewer mistakes. I mean, at Duke, they were like the big plays that they were giving up were down a lot. They were able to keep Riley Leonard in the pocket for the most part and limit his danger as a runner. Offensively, I think the biggest thing that I see is just the way that Jeff Sims has been playing, particularly running the ball.
I knew you were going to say that. We are just...
Brent Key pointed it out after the game. He said, this is a way we've been wanting him to play, asking him to play, just, tucking in and running and taking on tacklers and playing with maybe more of an edge than they had in the past. And
such a different story than getting sacked 7 times and not even really, some of it, he wasn't looking that good earlier in the season, but some of it is almost like, if you don't have good protection, what can you do?
Part of it too. Yeah. So I think obviously as a quarterback, I think players are taking their lead from him, and so for him to see, be playing with a little more, not energy, not wrong, but just being willing to take on tackles and fighting for yards, I think that probably gets the guys around him pretty energized and inspired.
Okay, Ken, thank you so much for joining me.
Yep.
Thanks to all of you for watching. Make sure you go to ajc.com or subscribe to our YouTube channel to find more videos just like this one.